OPEC, what will oil demand look like in 2024? According to sources close to the group, OPEC is expected to maintain its forecast for oil demand growth in 2024. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries predicts that the growth rate in 2024 will be lower than in 2023, at 2.35 million barrels per day, or 2.4%. Nevertheless, this percentage is still much higher than the annual average of the previous decade, excluding the years of the COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, it is higher than the forecast by the International Energy Agency, IEA. In fact, the IEA predicts a significant slowdown in demand growth in 2024, reaching only 860,000 barrels per day. In recent years, OPEC and the IEA have had many disagreements in their outlooks. OPEC has accused the IEA of making irresponsible forecasts and has requested that the IEA adjust them. Demand growth is a sign of the potential strength of the market and sets the foundation for future decisions by OPEC and allied countries. In June, OPEC Plus extended the decision to cut oil supply until 2024 to support the market, as they are concerned that weakening demand could weigh on prices. 3 OPEC sources stated that although demand growth could weaken, the situation will not be as severe as the IEA has feared. One source within the group stated, the increase in oil demand in 2024 could be much lower than in 2023, with a potential range of 1.5 to 1.7 million barrels per day. OPEC will announce its first forecast for 2024 in the monthly report, expected to be released on July 13. At a conference this week, high-ranking officials from OPEC countries, such as Amin Nasser, CEO of Saudi Aramco, expressed optimism about demand prospects, despite the challenges occurring in the global economy. Asia is growing. In China alone, from 2019 to 2023, the growth rate will be 3 million barrels per day, and in India, it will be 1 million barrels per day, he said. Due to changing economic prospects and political instability, oil demand forecasters must regularly adjust their forecasts with significant changes. Not to mention, this year's forecasts must consider the potential recovery of Chinese demand and interest rate hikes.
NATO summit. British Defence Minister discusses President Zelensky's conduct. British Defence Minister, Mr. Ben Wallace, spoke about President Zelensky's complaints when NATO refused to extend an invitation to Ukraine. Speaking on July 12 at the NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, Mr. Wallace stated that Ukraine quickly receives support from the West but does not always express gratitude. Regardless, people still want to see some appreciation from them, Mr. Wallace said. Sometimes you are asking nations to give up their own weapons. Sometimes you have to convince lawmakers on Capitol Hill to agree, Mr. Wallace added, noting that Western leaders deciding to send weapons to Ukraine implies accepting a loss of support from certain voter segments. Mr. Wallace revealed that last year, he traveled 11 hours to reach Ukraine. There, he received a list of weapons that Kiev needed assistance with. You know, we are not Amazon. I told them that, Mr. Wallace said, referring to the e-commerce platform Amazon. According to Mr. Wallace, despite President Zelensky's complaints, the NATO summit statement is still a positive signal for Ukraine. There is an agreement that Ukraine belongs to NATO, Mr. Wallace remarked. Mr. Wallace believes that whenever the conflict in Ukraine subsides, the country will have the opportunity to receive an invitation to join NATO. Previously, on July 11, the 31 NATO member states decided not to extend an invitation to Ukraine. NATO stated that Ukraine could join when member countries agree and conditions are met. NATO did not specify a timeline or specific conditions for Ukraine's accession. Earlier, President Zelensky posted on Twitter that it would be unprecedented and unreasonable if NATO did not extend an invitation or provide a specific timeline for Ukraine's membership. The Ukrainian president emphasized that unclear signals from NATO indicate weakness. Quoting a U.S. official, The Washington Post reported that the U.S. delegation at the NATO summit was angry about President Zelensky's message. From Vilnius, President Zelensky stated on July 12 that NATO's discussions on military assistance for Ukraine were good, but he was still not satisfied. We can say that the results of the summit are positive. But it would be optimal if we receive an invitation, President Zelensky said. In an interview with CNN, Mr. Jake Sullivan, U.S. National Security Advisor, stated that Ukraine joining NATO at this time would mean direct conflict with Russia. Mr. Sullivan expressed that the U.S. supports NATO's cautious approach to Ukraine's membership proposal. According to Mr. Sullivan, President Biden will have a frank discussion with President Zelensky regarding this issue.